Chapter 23 can be trust systematic reviews in medical education. How to write good reviews to impact practice and research. Vladimir Patricio, Sacheta Dandikar. Abstract. Medical education was facing one of its most challenging moments due to the complexity of developments with implications in healthcare. When the COVID-19 pandemic situation emerged, which resulted in the most dramatic changes in medical education, forcing schools to abandon face-to-face teaching during the night. These challenges require schools and teachers to make difficult decisions. Therefore, a shift from opinion-based to evidence-based is crucial. But evidence is difficult to find for the busy teacher. This becomes even more imperative because social responsibility is required from medical schools that are now under scrutiny, which implies providing evidence to justify their curricula. The question now is to explore whether we can have something reliable in medical education equivalent to what Cochrane is doing for clinical medicine. BEME collaboration, introduced in 1999, is the answer while offering secondary research, which involves a comprehensive search of all potentially relevant studies using reproducible criteria, transparent selection of studies, research design, synthesized data, and interpreted results. BEME, with more than 60 published systematic reviews, is at the forefront of evidence-informed practice in medical and health professional education. This chapter will take you through the basis of educational evidence compared to clinical evidence, the impact of BEME on practice and research, how to write and submit a BEME systematic review, and what BEME authors can expect from BEME and AME. It hopes to be a guideline for authors to write good systematic reviews, which therefore will have an impact on practice and research. Key words: BEME, Best Evidence Medical Education, Evidence-Based Teaching, Assess Need. Systematic reviews are a critical component of evidence-informed policy making not only in health, but also in many other domains. A high-quality systematic review is described as the most reliable source of evidence to guide clinical practice. The purpose of a systematic review is to deliver a meticulous summary of all the available primary research in response to a research question. Systematic reviews search, appraise, and collate all relevant empirical evidence in order to provide a complete interpretation of research results. It is a form of analysis that medical researchers carry out to synthesize all the available evidence on a particular question. The BEME collaboration is an international group of individuals, universities, and professional organizations established in 1999 by Harvard et al. As an effort to move from the use of anecdotal information in medical education to the use of evidence synthesis through systematic review, mirroring the revolution seen in healthcare. After its founding, much of BEME's energy was put into a proof of concept to demonstrate that the synthesis and review techniques that were becoming a mainstay of evidence-based medicine could be applied within the health education arena. In line with the work of the Cochrane Collaboration 2050, the BEME methodology involves a comprehensive search of all potentially relevant studies. The use of explicit, reproducible criteria in the selection of studies for review, appraisal of research designs, data synthesized, and results interpreted. Searching for evidence to inform best practices in medical education is a complex and very demanding undertaking. Therefore, the objective of this chapter is to contribute to a better understanding of why BEME is important, how much it is trustworthy, and to inform on the process of writing and submitting a BEME systematic review. Brief. Medical education is facing complex challenges implying schools and teachers' decisions. Schools and teachers' decisions must be evidence-based. But is this possible? Evidence in clinical medicine versus evidence in medical education. BEME is a feasible and trustworthy answer for moving to evidence-based teaching. Writing and submitting a BEME systematic review. BEME impact. Contextualize. The question, what's a good doctor and how do you make one, on the cover and in September 2002 British Medical Journal editorial, sums up the question that medical schools have been asking themselves during the last 2 decades as they seek to find what works best in medical education, questioning whether their teachers are making the best decisions concerning the needed changes to be implemented. The problem is that in medical education we continue to witness intense debates on the best methods for teaching and assessing students, and there is no such thing because there is no one best method in education. This is why there was a need for evidence-based, a movement started to be recognized by Harden et al., who stated in 1999 there is a need to move from opinion-based education to evidence-based education. BEME, the best evidence medical and health professional education, is the implementation by teachers in their practice of methods and approaches to education based on the best evidence available. This move to evidence-based education is also crucial because more social accountability is currently required by medical schools who are now under scrutiny, not only from faculty but also from the public, needing evidence to justify their decisions. Therefore, the question remains if evidence is possible in education. Describe. Medical education is facing dramatic changes implying difficult decisions which require a move to evidence-based teaching. Medical education is facing one of its most challenging times due to the complexity of undergoing developments with implications in healthcare. Globalization, the explosion of medical knowledge and new technologies, patients' new requisites, new rights, and new expectations. The new generations of students arriving at universities requiring new teaching methods and the need for social accountability of medical schools are just some examples already in place. When the COVID-19 pandemic situation arose, implying the most dramatic changes in medical education, forcing schools to abandon face-to-face teaching overnight. These multiple challenges require schools and teachers to make rather difficult decisions. The problem is that the medical education community continues to witness intense debates on the best method for teaching and assessing students when there is no such thing because there is not a single best method in education applicable to all situations around the world. This is why there is a need for education to move from opinion-based to evidence-based to identify what works, for whom and in what circumstances, as stated by Harden et al. Back in 1999, when proposing the implementation of the BEME collaboration, searching for evidence to inform best practices in medical education is a complex and very demanding undertaking. As in clinical medicine, information overload is one of the main problems when looking for evidence in medical education. This is recognized by many authors for more than 2 decades, namely by Fraser and Dunstan 2010, Smith R 2010, Azer et al. 2016, just to give some examples. Smith, in a paper entitled Strategies for Coping with Information Overload, imagining himself asking God as he arrives in heaven, will we ever solve the problem of information overload? Sure, he'll answer, but not in my lifetime. The question now is to explore if we can have in medical education something equivalent to what Cochrane Collaboration, an international group dedicated to evidence-based medicine, which is based on the application of the scientific method to all medical practice, is doing in clinical medicine. This leads us to the question, can we trust BEME as much as we trust Cochrane in medicine? Is evidence possible in education? To answer this question, a study was implemented at the Faculty of Medicine of the University of Lisbon to examine the basis of educational evidence compared to clinical evidence as well as the different nature of the science behind each approach. Which are the major similarities and differences between a Cochrane and a BEME systematic review? Were the research questions. BEME reviews in medical education and Cochrane reviews in clinical medicine were compared based on reviews undertaken at the CEMB and the FMUL. Common steps were identified in both approaches, asking a relevant question, researching, selecting primary studies, carrying out critical coding and evaluation, synthesizing evidence, identifying implications for practice. While the major differences were research questions are more complex in BEME reviews than in Cochrane. In BEME, there are no standard guidelines for all studies. Synthesis in Cochrane gives a point of estimate when in BEME it only shows what works. For whom, in what circumstances. In Cochrane, a statement can be made when in BEME it may be just a general recommendation. In conclusion, both approaches seem to be similar in terms of methodology. The differences between them are perhaps more a matter of degree than the existence of fundamental differences. The need to define causality in education. In medical education, as in clinical medicine, a hierarchy of evidence should support decision making, but evidence alone is never sufficient for sound practice. This is why it is important to define causality in medicine and education. To understand the difficulty of undertaking a systematic review in education, the causal relationships in medicine and healthcare in general are of central importance because answers to several types of clinical questions depend on the assessment of whether a cause and effect relationship truly exists. A factor is the cause of an event if its operation increases the frequency of that event. This is true for clinical medicine and medical education, but in education, you need to pay attention to other variables, namely to the strong effect of the confounding variables, which are external factors that correlate with the outcome, but are not directly causal as described in the figure below. Figure 1. Confounding variables. Cause-independent variables. Result-dependent variables. Other factors confounding variables. This is extremely important when analyzing study results in education. Let us give an example. If in clinical medicine a benefit is found in an experimental study to test the efficacy of aspirin in a specific disease, then there should be no doubt that the intervention is the same for all patients, so it can be easily replicated. However, if positive results are found in medical education in an experimental study to identify the impact of a specific method implemented by a specific teacher, the transferability of results to practice is more difficult because it is impossible to dissociate the effects of the confounding variables, namely the teacher charisma, enthusiasm, capacity for motivating students, etc., from the intervention itself. BEME and evidence-based teaching. In many circumstances, where previous teaching solutions are not effective to address the complex challenges medical education is facing, or when medical schools wish to introduce new developmental changes, BEME, whose goal is to provide and make available the latest findings of scientifically grounded educational research, can be the answer enabling teachers and administrators to take informed decisions. To achieve this goal, BEME identifies the best evidence available to support evidence-based decisions rather than opinion-based ones, offers opportunities for training and development in relation to the implementation of evidence-informed teaching, and translates research findings into practice. As evidence in education is possible and BEME is trustworthy, we share below some examples of BEME guides giving answers to support teaching daily practice. Should we use simulation in my teaching, and what are the 10 measures I can take to make it more effective? Yes, we should, and the features are providing feedback, repetitive practice, curriculum integration, range of difficulty level, multiple learning strategies, capture clinical variation, controlled environment, individualized learning, defined outcomes, and ensuring of simulator validity. Should we use a multiple mini interview or a traditional method for selecting students for undergraduate health programs? The answer is that MMIs used for selection to undergraduate health programs appear to have reasonable feasibility, acceptability, validity, and reliability. Reliability is optimized by including 7-12 stations, each with one examiner. The schools must identify the attributes they value and blueprint them to the interviews. The evidence is stronger for face validity, with more research needed to explore content validity and predictive validity. In published studies, MMIs do not appear biased against applicants on the basis of age, gender, or socio-economic status. However, applicants of certain ethnic and social backgrounds did not fare as well in a very small number of published studies. Performance on MMIs does not correlate strongly with other measures of non-cognitive attributes, such as personality inventories and measures of emotional intelligence. The answer is given by BEME Guide 37, Evidence regarding the utility of multiple mini-interview for selection for undergraduate health programs. A BEME systematic review by Reset Allied 2016. What developments, changes in medical education have been deployed as a response to COVID-19? What is their impact? What lessons have been learned? The introduced changes are a rapid shift to synchronous and asynchronous remote learning occurred that is likely to persist beyond the pandemic, and attention must be paid to learner engagement, structure, and organization in the future. Early developments supported alternatives to clinical placements or continued clinical exposure using telehealth, personal protective equipment, and physical distancing. A few articles of exceptional quality, most notably a digital learning package to support well-being, were identified that can serve as models to guide future educational developments and reporting. Gaps in the literature were identified with additional studies needed in the areas of assessment, admissions and selection to postgraduate training, and faculty development. While there was often a lack of practical detail to support the educational community in enactment of novel interventions and limited evaluation data, the range of options deployed offers much guidance for the medical education community. The answers are given in BEME Guide 63, Developments in Medical Education in Response to the COVID-19 Pandemic. A rapid BEME systematic review, and also in BEME Guide 64, an update on developments in medical education in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, a rapid BEME systematic review. It is important to highlight that they were the last two BEME guides published at the time this chapter was written to answer the main questioning of the medical education agenda. The above questions and answers are just 3 examples from around 160 research questions available from the 64 systematic reviews published so far. Writing a BEME systematic review. A systematic review is a secondary research process based on primary studies. It attempts to collect all existing evidence on a specific topic in order to answer specific research questions. They offer a number of benefits, namely providing an overview of the evidence, helping to identify gaps in the field, highlighting concerns in studies, and providing guidelines for practice and future research. Writing a good BEME systematic review, as said above, is a demanding process, especially due to the strong effect of the confounding variables. Some requisites are crucial for a successful BEME systematic review. At the beginning, a relevant educational problem needs to be identified. Then, research questions should be established, which need to be feasible and relevant. They can be framed using PICO criteria, population, intervention, control, and outcomes, and should be used to help establish your search strategy. At the end, the research questions need to be answered and implications to practice and research must be stated. It must be a coherent process from the educational problem until the transferability of results into practice and research. Therefore, the methods, data synthesis, discussion, and the conclusions need to be aligned. Systematic reviews that end up concluding only that more research is needed are no longer acceptable. Submitting a BEME systematic review. There are two ways of submitting a systematic review. The traditional BEME review process, which consists of 4 stages. Stage 1, topic registration. Stage 2, protocol development and review. Stage 3, review development. Stage 4, final adjudication of the review and publication. All stages are crucial, but the protocol is probably the one requiring special attention because a good protocol almost assures the success of the review, and the decision on protocol allows the authors to progress further. Detailed information on BEME stages is outlined at BEME website. The protocol is peer-reviewed by an assigned BEME International Collaborating Center and following any requested revisions is posted on the BEME website. It must clearly identify what type of review is planned, identify what the practical contribution to knowledge will be once the review is complete, argue that there is a sound link between the research question and the secondary research methodology that will be used to identify answers to the question. Give a clear definition of the key concepts in the review question or show how these will be arrived at. The alternative review process. High-quality systematic reviews may become a BEME review without progressing through stages 1-4. This pathway is good for groups who already have significant expertise in reviews and do not require the support offered by BICCs and the BEME Review Committee to be successful. The advantages to authors include the recognition of the review as meeting BEME's high standards and the extended abstract manuscript word limits which are reserved for BEME reviews. BEME peer review process is supportive. It is important to clarify what authors can expect from BEME whose peer review process is supportive, unlike what happens in other peer-reviewed journals. BEME is highly committed to support authors throughout the handling process for a successful systematic review as well as providing an editorial service, while keeping high-quality standards of exigency. During the process of writing a systematic review, the authors are supported by a BICC, which is appointed by the BEME Review Committee to supervise the authors. Supervision is given from protocol stage until the submission of final manuscript. The list of current BICCs is available at https://www.bmecollaboration.org/BICCS/. A second example of BEME support is the fact that the 2 checklists used by BEME reviewers to assess the protocols or the final manuscripts are made available to authors immediately after acceptance of their topic registration. From them, the authors can check their protocol of final manuscript against the BEME criteria used by reviewers. To understand what authors can expect from AME is also important. After registration and protocol are accepted, AME is committed to publish the review. Publication depends on the successful achievement of all steps of the handling process. BEME reviews are published in 2 formats, BEME Spotlight and a paper in Medical Teacher once final manuscript is accepted. It will be listed in the content pages of the journal and indexed in Index Medicus. BEME Impact. For almost 2 decades, BEME has been contributing with great impact to evidence-based teaching. Considering 2019, the year immediately prior to the COVID-19 pandemic situation arose, when BEME celebrated its 20th anniversary, we verified that 3 BEME guides are among the 4 papers with the most citations in medical education journals, namely a BEME systematic review of the effects of interprofessional education, BEME Guide 39 by Reeves et al. 2610, a systematic review of faculty development initiatives designed to enhance teaching effectiveness, a 10-year update BEME Guide 40 by Steinert et al. Evidence regarding the utility of multiple mini-interview for selection to undergraduate health programs. BEME Guide 37 by Reset LI, 2610. Through BEME, systematic reviews are among the top 10 papers most downloaded from medical education journals. The best evidence in medical education systematic review to determine the most effective teaching methods that develop reflection in medical students. BEME Guide number 51 by Jane Iger et al. 2019. A best evidence medical education systematic review of what works best for health professions, students using mobile devices for educational support on clinical placements. BEME Guide number 52 by Gillian et al. 2019. These benchmarks are important because there is no benefit in making systematic reviews available if schools, teachers, students, and other stakeholders do not see the need. This is why we need you, the readers of this chapter, to join BEME collaboration to help the dissemination of the BEME culture. Each school around the world has a crucial role to play to develop the BEME culture of evidence. Let us share some examples of school contributions made in the countries of the authors of this chapter. In India, many researchers are now using systematic reviews to consolidate evidence-based strategies. Not only are the systematic reviews related to the subject disciplines, but also the reviews related to health professions education are gaining momentum. This is indeed a very encouraging time for evidence-based medical education. The reviews are being registered in International Prospective Register of Systematic Reviews. We have many BEME contributors of Indian origin. Two BEME reviews deserve a mention: predictive values of measurements obtained in medical schools and future performance in medical practice. BEME Guide 5 and the effect of educational gains on medical students' learning outcomes, a systematic review. BEME Guide 40, which include Indian authors from New Delhi and Coimbatore. We hope that this will provide enough incentive for all of you to explore this new world of best evidence in medical education. In Portugal, medical schools are progressively basing their decisions on evidence. The CEMBE of the FMUL published one study, Systematic Reviews of Evidence in Medical Education and Clinical Medicine. Is the nature of evidence similar? And a systematic review, is the OSCE a feasible tool to assess competencies in undergraduate medical education? An update of the last review was submitted to BEME. If joining BEME interests you, please contact us. You are most welcome. Summarize. We have seen that medical education is facing dramatic developments, with COVID-19 in top of them. These developments imply medical schools and teachers to make difficult decisions. This is why a move to evidence-based teaching is needed to support those decisions. To find evidence is difficult, namely for the busy teacher, and BEME collaboration may be the answer while impacting in practice and research. We also have seen that BEME is feasible and trustworthy, and how to write and submit a BEME systematic review. With more than 60 systematic reviews currently published and 20 under processing, BEME is starting to be recognized as the leader in secondary research whose main challenges in the near future concern to offer more training to the public, to the BICC reviewers and authors, and above all increase the dissemination of the evidence-based teaching culture. Evaluate. Before concluding, we leave some questions below as a self-assessment opportunity. How do you justify the need to move to evidence-based teaching? Which are the three fundamental requisites for a good systematic review? If all stages are important when writing a BEME systematic review, which is the most critical one? Which are the two processes to submit a BEME systematic review? Why is the BEME peer review process different from peer review in other journals? How is BEME supporting the authors? Please give 2 examples. It would be great to have your feedback on this chapter. Please let us know what is the main message you got from this chapter and what else should we have done to improve this chapter. Your comments and suggestions are most welcome. Road ahead. Try to generate new topics based on existing knowledge, trends, gaps observed, and medical education needs problems. Select a methodology that suits your research question. Adapt your findings to your local context and translate them into practical recommendations. Arrive at a conclusion that would be appropriate for stakeholders, policymakers, and scientific community. Do not forget that a hierarchy of evidence should support decision making, but evidence alone is never sufficient for sound practice. Above all, it is crucial to contribute to the move from education based in opinion to education based in evidence.